Hey folks, I'm Mark Ryan. This is Super Review, and this is the Audeze MM-500, or as some people call it, the Manny. It's the Manny Mariquin 500. I don't know. It's named after some Grammy Award-winning music mixer, which, to be honest, doesn't mean that much to me. But what does was my experience at CanJam a few months ago. Back in September, I went down to LA. Headphone show, every headphone imaginable at my disposal. I listened to as many as I could, and to be honest, the MM500 was the one that I walked away the most impressed with. And now, it can be hard with a straight face to say that a $1,700 headphone, yes, this is a $1,700 headphone, it can be hard to say with a straight face that this is a good deal. But given the price of a lot of the stuff that I was comparing it with, and the fact that the MM500, I thought, held its own, well, it started to make sense. So I got home from CanJam, and to be honest, I couldn't stop thinking about the MM500, so I went ahead and bought one for myself. Hence, I've got it here. But, of course, show floor experience is different from living with a headphone long term, and ever since, I don't know, late September, early October, I've been living with the Audeze MM500, trying to figure out how much do I love this headphone, and do those impressions that I had stand up to the real world, including some extended time listening to the Focal Utopia 2022. So that's what we're going to talk about. If you're interested in checking out the Audeze MM500, of course, I've got links in the description down below, but this is a review. This is a live review, like all my other reviews. And if you're here now live, what's up? How's it going? If you've got questions about the MM500, anything that we talk about today that I don't get to, feel free to stick around through the live portion, the live chat portion, and I'll answer all of your burning questions. But for now, we're just going to get through the review. We're going to talk about the build, the physical stuff. I'll talk about the sound, the tonal balance, the technical performance, and then I'm going to get into a head-to-head comparison with the MM500 versus a Focal Utopia 2022, which I've got on hand. Thank you to a viewer, Scott Pledger. And I think that is as much as I need to talk about at this point. So let's go back to the table and start talking about first the physical stuff here with the MM500. And as you see out here, this is the spread of what comes inside the box. It's not a ton. Headphones don't come with nearly as many accessories as IEMs do, but there is some pretty good stuff in here, including this little bag, which, I don't know, it's a nice little touch. I'm gonna put it to the side for now so it's not in the way. The other big thing that's not here let me pull this, is the pack. This is the carry case that the MM500 comes in. A lot of Audezes come in this case. I don't know how much you're interested in seeing it. It just, you know, it's got a lock and a key on it. It's pretty extra. I don't know if this is a thing that I personally will use a lot, but if you are, let's say, a traveling music mixer and you need a headphone that's made for you, maybe that's useful. I'm not a traveling music mixer. I just sit at home and listen to this headphone. But that is nice that they include that case. Before we talk about the headphone itself, let's talk quickly about this cable. This is a pretty standard Audeze cable. I've seen this with a number of other Audeze headphones, and generally, well, it's a little bit on the heavyweight side, as you might hear it clacking around as I try to unwind it. But it is generally actually a pretty good little cable. Let me punch in on this so you can take a look. It's got a braided, almost IEM style look, but it is quite a bit thicker, and even a little bit of a harder plastic than you would usually expect on an IEM cable. Nonetheless, I do think this is a better than average headphone cable. My biggest quibble with it would be, well, I've got two quibbles. One, it is a 6.3 millimeter termination down here, which is totally fine if you're planning to hook it up to desktop amplifiers and stuff, but I am mostly a portable listener, so I prefer a 3.5 millimeter connector. And then my other small quibble will be that the length on it is a little bit on the long side for portable use. I would say it's probably around 6 feet in length, so it's not a stupid long, like a 10-foot long cable or anything like that, but for portable usage, it's not quite ideal. I will give a quick shout out to, this is Heart Audio Cables. I bought this from them. It's like 60 bucks as a replacement cable. I guess maybe as we're talking about that, Audeze does use these little mini XLR connectors, which are semi-standard. Like, there's not a ton of options out there in this connector to find replacement cables, but they are out there, and Heart Audio Cables is an example of a company that makes some options there. And this is just a really nice simple cloth cable that's my preferred length, 3.5 millimeter like I like, and yeah, well, there you go. Again, stock cable, not bad, but for portable use like I like, it's a bit much. Okay, let's talk about now the headphone itself. I've had some previous experience with Audezes in the past, and mostly it was like the Audeze LCD2 Classic, which I think is a pretty good representation of classic Audeze design. I just generally associate Audeze with kind of a heavy, clunky, unfinished industrial look, which those might sound like critical words. Those are things I actually think are cool about Audeze. Like, I dig it. It's an aesthetic. The MM500, however, is another thing, I think. I think it does have some of the familiar design language, but it's just a much more polished, a much more finished look versus a lot of those other Audezes, like the LCD2 Classic, the LCD-X, etc. It's got really, really nice premium materials. Let's punch in on this so you can appreciate as I describe them. Like, you've got all metal around here, the yoke is all metal, the grill is all metal, you've got these steel bars, you've got a steel headband, you've got a leather strap here, and I do believe this is actual leather. You've got very plush, I believe, again, actual leather pads, and just everything about the build quality on this headphone exudes premiumness. Just really nice materials. I think also importantly, it doesn't feel fragile. Like a lot of other high-end headphones out there do feel a little bit on like the delicate and precious side. And the MM500, look, it's a $1,700 headphone. I'm gonna be somewhat careful with it, but it doesn't feel like the kind of headphone that I have to be super careful with. And I like that. Again, I like portable use. I like carrying this around the house, and that might mean going into the kitchen, putting it on a table, et cetera, et cetera. And I don't wanna have to be overly delicate with something, and I really do appreciate that. If I did have one quibble with the build quality of it, it's that it's just, this is maybe a difficult thing to demonstrate. It's kind of a difficult headphone to hold one-handed. You can see if I hold it here like this, and this is, almost nobody will understand what this means unless you are actually living with this thing, but it just means if I go to pick it up, like the cups kind of swivel out, and it makes it a little bit difficult to handle. So that would be my one quibble, but I don't know. I really quite dig the aesthetic and the build quality and just almost everything about the build on this headphone. One thing that is worth talking about, as pretty much whenever you're talking about Audeze headphones, is the weight. The weight here on the MM500 is just under 500 grams, which is a lot. Like, that's about 100 grams to put it into context. It's about 100 grams heavier than something like a pair of AirPods Max, which are themselves somewhat known for being, you know, somewhat heavy headphones. But these are still quite a bit lighter than a lot of other heavier Audeze headphones. I mentioned some of the older stuff is just known for that more industrial build. Some of those weigh like upwards of 600 grams. So this one being at under 500 grams is still not a lightweight headphone, but I think it's at the point where, to be honest, the weight didn't bother me. I don't know. I don't have like an especially strong neck. I'm not like a strongman weightlifter or anything like that, but really didn't have any quibbles here with the weight on this. Whereas when I recall my experience listening to the Audeze LCD2 Classic, that would start to wear on me a little bit after, you know, an hour or so of wearing it. What else can I say about this thing? Yeah, I don't know. Let's talk about the fit and comfort a little bit more, okay? You may have heard of this. If you've seen any reviews of the MM500, you've probably heard people talk about this is a clampy headphone, okay? The clamp pressure left to right is, I don't want to say it's excessive, but it is one of the clampier headphones out there. Now, again, I'm pretty familiar with and very well experienced with listening to the Sennheiser HD600, which is also known for being a clampy headphone. And to be honest, the HD600 just doesn't really bother me. This, I would say, is a little bit clampier than the HD600. But again, most of the time, the clamp really didn't bother me. I did not try like even doing like any stretching out of it. I'm like the stock clampy pressure of this headphone, I'm pretty happy with. Sometimes there's some days where it does seem like after a couple of hours the pressure will start to build up, and I'll have to come up here and just kind of relieve a little bit of pressure. But for the most part, pretty happy with the way this thing fits. And I guess I'll punch in on this so you can take a look at the MM500 on my head and get a set. So I didn't really talk about this too much when I was talking about the ear pads, but they are fairly large around, and I think plenty of room in the inside the ear cup for my ears, both front to back and top to bottom. My ear, I don't think, is touching really anything, and then the depth on the ear pad is also pretty good. It might not look that deep here from the front, but that's because these pads are indeed an angled pad. Let's see if I can get that on camera. So it's a little bit thicker here in the back than it is in the front. And then you can see the depth wise, it's actually pretty deep. The one thing that I will call out, and this is a thing I only experienced a couple of times. I don't know how variable my anatomy is, but you can see back here, these little angled slots here on the driver. I believe these are what Audeze calls the phasers. They are little angled metal bits, and there were a couple of times back when I first started listening to this thing where I could feel my ears just grazing over the top of them, and it was slightly irritating, if I'm honest. But I don't know, again, what's with the anatomy of my ear that since then I haven't felt it, but felt like it was worth talking about. But yeah, overall, like honestly, this is just an awesome build of a headphone. Again, it feels sturdy, it looks awesome. It's comfortable to wear. Maybe some quibbles with the clamp pressure, but to be honest, like it's never a thing that steers me away from this headphone at all. Generally just really, really very happy with this thing. And I guess that's about as much as I can talk about the physical stuff. So let's dive into talking about the sound here on the MM-500. And the one thing that I did also kind of want to talk about up front is drivability of this headphone. I mentioned that I bought the Heart Audio cable aftermarket for this, and in fact, I bought that cable before I even got the headphone because I knew I wanted a shorter cable. When I bought the cable initially, I bought it with a balanced 4.4 millimeter connector because I assumed an over-ear headphone, I'm going to be running it on portable sources. I need as much power output as I can get. But the truth of the matter is that honestly, this thing is just not that hard to drive. I've been driving this pretty reliably off of my MacBook Air, right? It's not even one of the newer MacBook Pros, it's an M1 MacBook Air at like 50% volume or less. So drivability here on the MM-500 is actually pretty good. I would say, you know, if you're trying to run it off something like an Apple dongle on a Pixel, like an Android phone, it will probably be deficient. It will probably not be enough. But if you're running it off of, you know, a decent MacBook or even a portable digital audio player, you're going to be fine even over 3.5 millimeter. And if you need it, there is the option, of course, of getting balanced cables for this thing. But that was just kind of the upfront bit. Let's talk about the sound, and let's talk about the sound signature here on the MM-500. And the first thing I wanted to talk about was how this is actually a little bit different than how I heard it at the show. Okay, my initial impressions at CanJam were that, I mean, it was mostly a neutral tonality, but I was hearing what was a little bit, just kind of like an aggressiveness to the sound that I attributed to, I assumed it was going to be kind of like a mild V-shaped sound signature, a little bit of emphasis in the treble, a little bit of emphasis in the bass, giving it that real visceral physical sound. When I got it home and spent a lot more time listening to it and also threw it up on my measurement rig, which I've got linked in the description down below if you want to see the measurements here on the MM-500, what I learned was it's actually really not V-shaped at all. In fact, this is a pretty neutral tuned headphone. And if anything, the treble, the lower treble especially, is actually a little bit on the relaxed side. There is a little bit of upper treble zing, so there is some emphasis there. And the bass, well, there's not so much emphasis in the bass, it's just really linear bass that extends really well into the sub bass frequency. So all in all, like the overall tonal balance of this headphone is really just, it's neutral, that actually has a bit of warmth to it because of that relaxed treble. I would say this is overall a vocal focused sound, but it does have that bass extension and that treble extension, which give it just that sense of visceralness that you might normally expect of a more aggressively tuned headphone. So there you go. That's the general sound signature. Let's now talk about what do I like about the sound here on the MM-500. And I'll be upfront, like it's almost everything. I love this headphone, obviously, because I bought it, right? It's a lot of money, and I decided it was worth buying it. All right, let's talk about that tonal balance, first of all, as one of the things I like. The MM-500 has gotten comparisons with things like the Sennheiser HD650. And if you've watched my channel before, you know I am a simp for the HD600. Now, I think this comparison versus the HD650 is actually pretty good. I generally prefer the HD600 because it's a little bit more forward and you get a little bit more technical performance versus the HD650. This being a little bit warmer and a little bit more laid back, I think is tonally a little bit closer to the HD650, but because the technical performance on this thing is so outstanding, it doesn't come with that technical hit or that technical demerit versus the brighter, more forward tune of the HD600. Basically, this is just a long way to say I really love the mid-range focus tonality on this thing. It really just does everything just about right for me. It's smooth, it's tonally correct, vocals sound good. There's maybe a little bit of a warm coloration to it because of that relaxed treble. But overall, this is just like, this is my bag when it comes to tuning. Now, again, I mentioned like at CanJam, I heard this as kind of somewhat of an aggressive tune. And what I think I was responding to at the show was just the performance, the technicalities of this set. Again, the treble is somewhat relaxed, but the speed, the definition, and the extension on the treble here with the MM500 are all very, very standout. And that contributes to really good timbre on high frequency percussion, stuff like hi-hats. Cymbals just have like a really nice, satisfying weight to them. And honestly, like you get just kind of like the right amount of pluckiness on things like guitar string pulls. Honestly, there's a lot of hi-fi headphones that I've been listening to this year, and this year's kind of been the year that I've gone out and really tried to listen to a lot of the hi-fi stuff in the headphone realm. A lot of the stuff I actually struggle with the treble in it. Like I find them a little bit fatiguing in a lot of those sets. Like it does, yes, contribute to, you know, a sense of spaciousness and incisiveness that I do like in some of these other headphones. But again, I often find it fatiguing. Here with the MM500, I get that technical performance, but I don't have any of those issues with fatigue. And I think it's because of that somewhat relaxed lower treble. Above those tonal characteristics that I really, really like, this is just a really dynamic sounding headphone that has excellent, excellent timbre. Okay, and these are things that you could probably say about something like the HD600, but the HD600 doesn't have, you know, maybe a sense of spaciousness or that bass extension, which the MM500 really, really does. It gives me just overall a very rich and organic sound. These are things that I find very, very important, especially when you're comparing it versus some other headphones that can sound a little bit more sterile. The MM500 is not that. This is just a very visceral sounding headphone. You've got impactful bass with a nice sense of physicality to it and a convincing body and a sense of depth to it. The mid-range has a nice sense of body to it. The treble is clean, again, a little bit on the relaxed side, but extends quite well. This is a comparison I didn't really think of until I was like starting to prepare for this live stream, but in a lot of ways, this kind of reminds me of like a more tonally correct 64 audio U12T, which is an IM. Just the way that the U12T is kind of like got this really dynamic, assertive, aggressive, but also relaxed tonality to it. That's what the MM500 does, but it also does it with, I think, a better tonal balance because it doesn't have some of that vocal recession of the U12T. So if you're not familiar with the U12T, that is very, very high praise of this headphone. Okay, so that is what I like here about the MM500, but of course, I gotta complain about something, right? So what do I not like about the MM500? Well, if I'm perfectly honest, I kind of got nothing, okay? I mean, if I want to be really picky, this headphone is pitched as a headphone for music production, right? Again, it's named after a Grammy award-winning music mixer. That lower treble relaxation, it might not actually be the best for production. Again, I don't do music production, so who am I to say? Manny Marroquin, listen to that guy. He says this thing's great. Okay, but in my mind, I feel like with a music production or just any sort of production, you want maybe a little bit more emphasis there on the lower treble just to kind of like reveal deficiencies and like errors and stuff like that, which, you know, a brighter tuned headphone can be good for. This, because it's a little bit relaxed there, might not actually be the best there. I would still say that the detail reproduction on this set is, of course, outstanding, but it just has less of that in-your-face sense of resolution versus some other headphones. So that is going to be the gist of what I think about the Audeze MM-500. as you can probably tell, a headphone I'm pretty excited about. But how does it compare versus kind of the top of the class when it comes to headphones? So I did hear this versus a number of headphones at CanJam, including the Focal Utopia 2022. But those were show floor impressions. Like, it was loud. I don't know how much to make of it. Thankfully, Super Review viewer Scott Pledger was very kind enough, and as I lean over here, loaned me a Focal Utopia 2022. So for the past week or so, I've been comparing these two headphones to really try and figure out, one, am I kidding myself at how good this thing is? If I compare it with a $5,000 Focal Utopia, am I going to find all the deficiencies of this headphone, or is it going to stand the test? So let's talk about how these things compare. All right, first things first, the Audeze MM-500. This is a $1,700 headphone, and it is a planar magnetic driver. Sorry I didn't talk about that up front, but I don't know. I don't play too much into driver technologies. Here with the Focal Utopia, it is a dynamic driver headphone, which is a different technology for making sound, although interestingly, this one actually sounds a little bit more planar to me. That is neither here nor there. What is here is the price on the Utopia 2022. This is a $5,000 headphone. No, I didn't say that wrong. $5,000 headphone versus 17. Okay, these are very expensive headphones, but let's talk about how they compare. Now, in terms of the tonal balance, again, the MM-500, we just got done talking about this. It's neutral, it's mid-rangey, it's a little bit warm because of that relaxed treble, has really, really well extended bass. And just overall, like, it's just got, because of the tonal balance, it's got stellar timbre, very organic, natural sound, versus the Focal Utopia 2022, also neutral, but in head-to-head comparison, like, there's maybe a little bit of warmth in the mid-range, but it is overall brighter in the treble here on the Focal Utopia 2022. It makes it just a little bit more lively up top. But also, interestingly, I think it makes the timbre here on the Utopia 22 a little bit more digital sounding versus somewhat of more organic sounding MM-500, and that's where I talked about this sounding a little bit more planar than this one does, because this one sounds a little bit more plucky and digital and maybe even a little bit metallic, especially versus the MM-500. Now, in terms of technical performance, differences between these, I mean, I'm going to say right up front, both of these are pretty outstanding, and deciding between the two, in a lot of ways, is pretty difficult. It's trade-offs. Like, one headphone does one thing really well, other headphone does another thing really well. So I'm just going to kind of talk about my general impressions. The MM-500, what really stands out is just like how visceral and physical this headphone is. It's got a lot of body through the mid-range and the bass, with excellent sense of imaging, a really good sense of space and head stage, but it's like almost, I don't even know how to describe this. This is like the deficiencies of human language, or at least my language, in describing sound. This creates like this very distinct, almost room sound, whereas this sounds almost a little bit more open. Well, I guess we'll talk about this. The brighter tune on this, I think, emphasizes like the sharp transient edges a little bit more than this, and I think that contributes to the slightly more digital, less organic sound. But it does also, I think, give this kind of a more open and like forwardish sounding sound. The bass here on the Utopia 22 is also, it's really good, but it's pretty standout, or pretty common Focal bass, right? It's got like that nice sense of physicality, especially in its attack impact. Versus the Mariquin, I would say that the bass here on the Utopia, and this is a thing I would also say about the Clear, the bass is maybe a little bit on the hollow sound, like it doesn't have quite that same guttural follow through, but again, it's really good in that initial physical attack. Overall, this is just the brighter, more forward sounding, kind of more open and airy sounding headphone, whereas this is the more aggressive, kind of like in your face, enveloping, organic sounding headphone. And again, like, which one has the bigger soundstage? Probably the Focal. Which one has better imaging? Honestly, they're both excellent. But really the difference is going to be like, which kind of sound do you want? Do you want that organic, rich sound, or do you want that really analytical, precise sound? Because that's kind of the pick. Okay, and now in terms of form factor, again, let's talk about the MM500 briefly. Just really, really stellar materials. And the build quality is honestly like, it's a build quality that I can carry around with me every day. I like that about it. Like, this doesn't feel like a very fragile headphone. It is a little bit on the clampy side, like we talked about. But comfort-wise, I like this. I think this is just an outstanding headphone. It has not been a problem for me. The focal, let's talk about this thing. I'll give you a bit of a zoom in on that. This is a very, very cool look. It is very, very, I mean, as you might expect with a $5,000 headphone. It's got some premium materials. In fact, up here on the headband, I do believe this is a carbon fiber headband, which is very, very premium materials. Weight-wise, it's actually about on par, honestly, with the MM500. But on the head, I guess I'll do a bit of a fit demonstration on this since I didn't get to do that before. This is much lighter clamp. It just kind of rests on the head, very similar to the way a lot of other focals fit. So I don't think anyone's going to have any issues with the side-to-side clamp pressure. The one area where I did have some slight fatigue was up here in the headbands. Just the contact point with the top of my head is a bit narrow, so I did get a little bit of a pressure point on that. So I would say that honestly for me, between these two, I actually found the MM500 to be the more comfortable long wearing session headphones, but obviously at this price point, both of these are very, very well built. The one thing that I will say is that this one just feels like the headphone that's easier to carry around and toss around. This one I feel is a little bit more fragile and a little bit more creaky, possibly because of that carbon fiber headband. Not that carbon fiber is fragile, it just, you know, it feels maybe a little bit on the brittle side. So I think, frankly, that's going to do it for my thoughts here on the Audeze MM500. Again, $1,700. It is not a cheap headphone. But I think versus the $5,000 Utopia 2022, like, it holds its own. Like, it doesn't beat it in every category, but it definitely beats it in some. And overall, this is the headphone I actually prefer. I'm glad I bought it. This is kind of a lame review. I just love this headphone. This is just me gushing over the MM500. But I guess I should give it a score. Do you want to guess? Yeah, it's going to be 5 stars out of 5. If you're interested in checking out the Audeze MM500, I do have links in the description down below. And while you're down there, if you found this review helpful, you liked it, you're having a good time, feeling cheery for the holidays, please give me a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, ding the YouTube bell, and I'll catch you on the next super review, unless you're here live, in which case hang out. And after this brief interlude, we'll have a chat.